Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Dad at Arms channel. I'm your host, Dad at Arms. I also go by Colt. And with me today, I'm joined by two very special guests. We have Tim Seeley and Freddie Williams. How's it going, guys?
Great.
I wish I had a cool name like Colt. Mine is so that's such a comic book name. I just have Freddie. That's the best I got.
When I was still a journalist, my byline was C, because my first name is Calvin.
Mhm.
And so my byline was C Colt Crane. And so it was the three C's. And I got a lot of compliments on that. I was like, oh, thank my parents.
Yeah, it doesn't. It seems like a movie name or a comic book name.
Yeah. So I
yeah.
was actually named after, my mom loved the Fall Guy
Which
TV
I saw
series.
the new one last night. So
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. And I still need to go see it. It looks great.
it's great.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. So I was named after Colt Seavers.
there you go. You were the Lee Majors version, but
Yes. Not the Ryan Gosling version. So yeah, let me turn some time over to the two of you and let you tell the viewers who you are and what it is you do. Why don't we go ahead and start with Freddie?
Okay. I'm Freddie Williams. I'm a comic book artist who's best known probably for drawing a bunch of crossovers in the last almost 10 years. So Batman, Ninja Turtles, He-Man and Thundercats, Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, Godzilla versus Power Rangers, and now Turtles of Grayskull, which is He-Man and the Ninja Turtles together. So I'm drawing the mini comics and also drawing the crossover for Dark Horse. Lots of crossover stuff.
Very cool. And Tim?
I'm Tim Seeley. I've been on the show before. Nobody's probably that surprised or interested to hear from me, but I've worked on lots of comics from my creator stuff like Hack Slash and Local Man to DC stuff like Grayson and Nightwing. And then for Master Universe, I've written some of the mini comics, Injustice vs. Master Universe with Freddie, Masterverse, Master of the Multiverse, the most recent Forge of Destiny, and then now Turtles of Grayskull.
Awesome. And to the both of you, everything that I've read of yours and seen the art for, I've just adored. I think Freddie, you have some of the best He-Man art out there.
Thank you.
I just love it. And Tim, it's always a pleasure to read your stuff. When I found out that you did the He-Man parody, the Colt and the Megalords.
Yeah, named after you, of course.
Yeah. I figured. Yeah, as soon as I saw that it was a He-Man parody comic with my name in it, I was like, well, I got to pick that thing up because that's awesome.
That thing inadvertently led to this in a weird way. That's how weird comics is, because I did that, and that fell in the lap of somebody at Mattel, and they were like, hey, this guy knows He-Man, and somehow that got me work, even though I was just I was gently making fun of it. So
yes,
there you go.
That's awesome. So we're here to talk about Turtles of Grayskull. I'm looking at this book here that you put out a couple years ago, Freddie, the crossover that almost was. I'll kind of hold that up.
Oh, it's got that invisible, hard to see blue.
Yeah, there we go.
It was in cloaked mode, and then now it's come out of cloak. Yeah.
Yes. So, this is something that's been in the works in one form or another for years. Can you guys kind of tell me about back when this was initially pitched and kind of what went wrong or why it was canceled? Yeah. Can you guys kind of cover the history of it?
Yeah. So in 2019, I was working on Batman Ninja Turtles Volume 3. So there was 3 different miniseries of Batman Ninja Turtles, and the third one started in very early 2019. About 2 or 3 months into the year, I got an email from the special, what are they called, like special projects or whatever at DC, and said, hey, after Batman Ninja Turtles, what do you think about this He-Man Ninja Turtles crossover? So at that point, there was no specific story that was attached, but I think they were just getting a feel for if I would be interested and or had any ideas or something. And I was very interested in doing it. And I basically was going to end Batman Ninja Turtles in August. So I asked, can we have like a month where I have some time off, and then start maybe in October, November or something like that? And they said, yeah. A few months went by, and during that time, I had suggested that, you know, DC or could do whatever they wanted to, but I had suggested Tim Seeley for that both of us could work on it together, because Tim impressed me a lot with Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, his lore knowledge for He-Man. So just to take a step back, I'm a big, you know, He-Man fan, and Thundercats. Those were like whenever I was in second, third, fourth grade, something like that. That was my whole world. And whenever, now flashing forward to 2018, whenever Tim and I were working together on Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, he was effortlessly knowledgeable about so much stuff in Masters of the Universe specifically, that he was the first person I thought of for He-Man and the Ninja Turtles. So I brought it up to him, said, you know, if you have some ideas, you know, basically get thinking about pitches or something like that now, because they just talked to me at DC. Well, a few months went by, so now we're more in the middle of 2019, and I hadn't heard from DC in a while about the project. I touched base again, and they said, "Oh, we're kind of on, we're taking a little bit of a break right now. I'll let you know." And I don't know why there needed to be a break or whatever. Like that's much, those types of conversations are made above my pay grade or above my head. And but during that time, I was still working on designs, and Tim and I had a couple of brief conversations. They were very brief about what we could be doing. Then in August of 2019, we went to PowerCon together, and that's whenever Tim was working on Masters of the Multiverse, which I was very envious that I couldn't be a part of. I really that was such a cool idea, cool story. I would have loved to have drawn that, you know. But we had some conversations there. We had a dinner there with Dan Fraga, and just like a big group dinner that we had some conversations about just some things that could happen in He-Man Ninja Turtles. And so this was like, I just finished Batman Ninja Turtles Volume 3. I knew that I'd be on some sort of hiatus before Ninja Turtles He-Man would happen, but I thought for sure, you know, there's nothing in my brain that made me think it might actually get canceled. It was just like a bit of a delay. So we may as well work on designs or just ideas or whatever. So the stuff that's in that sketchbook that you just had lifted up, that has mainly a bunch of designs that I came up with based off of stuff that Tim and I had just kind of spitballed. Mm-hmm. So I don't even think we really had like a detailed outline, but it was more like stuff that could happen. So I was using the extra time that I had in between small stuff that DC was giving me to fill in the time to just develop it further. Then in early 2020, this is before the pandemic, Kiki and I were at a convention in Australia. I mentioned that mainly because we almost got stuck there during COVID and stuff, which would be not a bad place to spend your time if we were stuck in Australia. But like on March the 3rd or 4th or something like that, the special projects editor from DC messaged me, and he said, "Okay, we're back on with Turtles of Grayskull," or it wasn't called Turtles of Grayskull, He-Man Ninja Turtles. Give me your convention schedule so we can kind of build the schedule for the book or the series around it. And I messaged Tim. I was very excited. We were both very excited. And then like 3 days later, I got a message from that same editor who said, "Oh, sorry, now it's canceled." Oh. And it was very anticlimactic. And it was right after, like we had just flown to a different part of Australia where we were in the same place, called Gold Coast, which is the same place that's where Tom Hanks and his wife had gotten COVID. So like we flew to that city, we landed. There's like all these messages about the border shutting down. Tom Hanks and his wife were on the same streets that we're about to be on. They had gotten COVID. They were taking selfies with dozens of people because they're really nice, but maybe they were spreading all their germs to everyone. And then we were going to go out on the streets and catch Tom Hanks's COVID. That's what we kept thinking. And then, the project was canceled. It was just very anticlimactic and also like a whiplash type of situation. And so after because I think I put out that sketchbook in maybe late 2021, I think, or maybe it was 22. I can't remember now. But basically I sat on the designs or the stuff that I'd done for at least a year or two, and thought it's a shame that they're just sitting in my portfolio. I would like to at least show them. Yeah. So then, I showed them online. There was a bunch of people who seemed to like them. And then inching forward slightly from that, I got messages from people from Mattel, people from Nickelodeon, IDW, that were saying, all of us are sorry that project didn't happen, but hopefully we can try to rekindle it, even if it's with a different company, because, DC Comics, they had the publishing rights to He-Man, but the stuff that we pitched, even my designs and stuff, were not like tied contractually to DC. Then if, He-Man went over to Dark Horse and all the story and design stuff that we had still existed, at least it was written down digitally or something. But by the time that, it kind of went away for a little bit, then in about a year ago or something, I got some messages from Mattel, from Paramount and stuff that were saying, we're going to do a crossover. It's not the same one, but we'd like you to be involved. At the time, it was just for me to draw the mini comics. There wasn't necessarily a plan to do the Dark Horse book yet. But of course, I was very hopeful for that, that there would be, I didn't know what it would be, because it's, none of my designs were used for the toys. And if we're using the design for the toys, we'll probably need a different story as well, because they're, the designs are kind of integral to story elements and stuff. So, I know that was rambling, and I apologize. It was like
okay.
10-minute long.
Great.
That's perfect. That's awesome.
Okay.
That's the thing. Freddie, you always remember details. I don't remember shit. I'm always like, did we talk about this? I don't, you're always like the guys like, here's what happened.
But part of it is because that specific time period was so, it was my first time to PowerCon, so it's easy to remember that. It's my first time that, I met Dan Fraga, one of the first times that we ever met, or physically hung out in person. So it's like easy for me to have like a bunch of firsts are very, stand out in my brain. And that, it was just a very exciting time, and then very disappointing whenever it didn't work out. But it like personally, at least for me, set me up to be even more excited once it came back, and even though it's in a different form. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, about how you guys, feel to have this kind of brought back after initially being disappointed. That's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim, please.
And the crazy thing too is like Mattel is the only company I've ever worked for that's like, well, we got you. Like every other company, every major corporation you work for, like they have short institutional memories most of the time, and like you do something for them, and they're like, great, thank you, but 6 months down the road, something else comes up and they forget you completely. But Mattel is always, and especially Rob David, is like, hey, you guys wanted to do this, and we're gonna make it happen, and when we do, it's yours. Like no one else does that. So to see that sort of actually play out, it like gives you faith also in this idea that if you do hard work and if you have a good idea, that it'll actually be worth something eventually. But and Freddie was the one driving that truck so hard when we're doing the initial stuff, and I was always really excited about it, but I was always like, yeah, but that's going to be like so many things to go through. So I always assumed it would be tough, not as tough as it ended up being. But then the fact that it's a toy line, I don't think that's something either Freddie or I expected, was that, what ultimately sort of ended up snagging it up was the fact that they're like, originally, hey, let's do a comic. And then, someone at Mattel going like, well, why don't we just license the Turtles and make a toy line, which is something, that's pretty outside the box. and so that, the fact that it got held up and it seemed to be sort of canceled and disappeared was actually because they were working on something crazier, which is I have a whole pile of those toys right there, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with. But the fact that it's plastic line of figures, that's huge. It's a huge line too. Yeah, that's pretty cool, and not at all what I thought. Where we were going with it. It's like there was no, Freddie and I did Injustice Master Universe. Like, can you imagine if they were like, oh, well, the reason this is going to take this is we're doing an entire line of He-Man and DC figures fused together. Like, what? And we wouldn't expect that, But that even possible seems so crazy to me, and that that now they're out in the world and they're real. The other day I got Mouse Jaw.
Yeah.
It's like crazy, man.
I got a bunch of them on my shelf back here behind me, and I think my favorite one out of all of them so far is Michelangelo.
Yeah,
mainly because of the wig. I think that's so much fun.
And it's a big part of the story, actually.
I'm very excited to see it.
Well, because it's spoilers, so turn it off. But so when we first saw the designs, Freddie was like, "I love that he has hair," and I was like, "I hate that he has hair." We made it a thing. So, like in the first issue, there's a whole thing where Mikey shows up. He's like, "I got hair," and then through a mechanism in the story I don't want to ruin. Later, it comes up again, and Mikey's going to grab the wig, and right after that says, "You touch that wig, I'll break your finger." Viewpoints on it.
It's That's just awesome. It's just so endearing to me, the idea that part of what Mikey would look at, what makes the Masters of the Universe cool, or makes He-Man specifically cool, and what would make him feel like he fits into the Eternian, warriors that would be he needs blonde hair. Like to him, it's as important as the armor that he's wearing on his chest. He needs that. That's what puts him into that mindset of I'm like He-Man now, or I'm like the Masters of the Universe now. That's really cute to me. And then Tim, you had pointed out to me there was a it has nothing to do visually with anything except for that the Turtles towards the end of the original Turtles sort of popularity in the 90s, there was a line of like fantasy Ninja Turtle toys where several of them did have hair. And you sent me the link to that. That blew my mind. I had no idea. I basically thought I had seen everything from the Turtles and stuff. When you showed that to me, it looked like it could be a part of the Masters of the Universe, this line. It almost looked like it could be an alternate figure, like, of the fifth costume that he wore or something like that. That was really cool.
Yes, that was a big part of the inspiration for this, because when those came out when I was a kid, I wasn't a kid. I was 19 or 20 years old. I think I was working at Target at the time, but I knew this was them doing Masters of the Universe. Like, that's what this, it was called Lords of the Sewer, I think, right? Lords of the, have
the like Lost Warriors of the Lost Sewer or something like that.
Yeah, I believe I should have remembered this because I've referenced it for Poor Freddie a million times, but they had a battle cat called War Cat, which was advertised but never came out. But as a kid, I remember, not a kid, a 20-year-old. But this looks incredible, and I really wanted to get it. But that line didn't finish out. I think the only ones they put out was the Leonardo He-Man and maybe some other stuff. But yeah, Lords of the Lost Sewer, is that what it's called?
Something along those lines.
I think it's brilliant. They're so
Warriors
cute.
of the Forgotten Sewer. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it is.
And so, when we started talking about this, like, well, I don't know, should we reference this? Because they had like and obviously that was also kind of part of the comics too, because some of the earlier comics, there was a guy who was sort of basically a Conan or a sort of He-Man kind of guy that they get involved with. That guy, was sort of referenced in later stuff. He met Rennet Tilly, so like all those things were kind of tied together, and so we were starting to see connective tissue that we could tie into to our story as well.
That's awesome. When I got the Michelangelo toy, it had the little blurb on the back, the little bio, and it said something to the effect of that he is inspired by the heroics of He-Man and wants to be like him. And it just made me think of, I have two teenage boys. One of the older one is securely in his teenage years, where he's moody and grumpy all the time. But the younger one, he's kind of on that cusp of he's still a kid and still likes to go outside and play and pick up sticks and play like kids do, but also kind of a teenager. So the Michelangelo thing totally reminded me of him, about how he's a teenager, but he still likes to pretend to be his hero. And I thought it was such
that's
cool
perfect
idea
for Mikey. That's
Yeah.
He'll never grow out of that, even if we were to make the elderly geriatric Ninja Turtles of some sort. He would still be doing that same type of thing. He just gets so excited. I have a good friend named John Simariva, he's a comic book artist. He lives in Australia. He drew the Batman Ninja Turtles Adventures comic, the one that kind of looks like Bruce Timm in the animated. Which was a great series as well. But in my brain, John Simariva is so funny and charming and willing to just make a big spectacle of himself. He always reminds me, that's who I think of body language wise when I'm drawing Michelangelo. Because like John was here, we were at a convention together, he went and got some new shoes, and it's like and this would be totally the type of thing Michelangelo would do. He put on the shoes to try them and then started walking like almost running, walking in the store up and down all of the aisles going, look how fast these shoes make me go. Like that. And that was so, I don't know. He was like hopping up over stuff. The little thing that you sit on to like try on your shoes and stuff. He was hopping over it and stuff. That's the kind of thing that I could see John saying or acting like or whatever. So I'm always picturing his body language. Like whenever like Tim has written some scenes where basically Mikey is, kind of in charge of telling the story. He's giving some of the exposition because he's the best at telling stories, and John is too. So I just picture the way he uses his hands and the sort of like his facial expression, then filter it through a Ninja Turtle face, his anatomy or whatever. So
that's cool. I like that. You mentioned a little bit earlier when you were going over kind of the history of getting to where we are now, that the stories are completely different. So the original story that was kind of being discussed has been scrapped, and this new Turtles of Grayskull, it's something completely different, right? It doesn't
totally different.
Share any DNA with the original.
Well, one element that Freddie and I talked about maintains, but we won't tell you what it is.
Okay.
But yes.
I just wanted to make sure I got that question in there, because I see a lot of fan speculation and stuff, about, is this the same thing from a few years ago that they're finally doing? So yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah,
you know what? Part. I almost just explained the differences, which would mean I would have to spoil what we really told. My brain just was like, let me just explain what the difference was. It's like for just a moment, if we had a telepathic link, you would just know all the stuff we're not supposed to talk about.
Man, that'd be awesome. So with the mini comics that you're drawing, that come packed with the toys, is that story more or less the same as what the 4-issue miniseries is going to be?
So there's without spoiling what Tim has written, Tim has done an excellent job of taking elements from the mini comic and still allowing them to, in quotes, exist.
Okay.
And then doing something different with that same starting point and some of the same plot points. So it is not the same story in that you're not going to just be seeing a retelling of those same mini comic stories. But if you, and I personally am going to, I haven't talked to anybody at Dark Horse about this. I'm going to try to push really hard to have the mini comic stuff packaged with the trade paperback. Eventually, we're talking like 6 months from now or whatever, because I think you could read all of the content of the mini comics and our Dark Horse crossover, and it all makes sense, but it's weaving in and out of, or sometimes to the side of, what's happening in the mini comics and stuff. So, because personally, I mean, Tim's of course a way better writer than I am, but I sometimes think to myself, how would I approach this, or if I had suggestions or whatever, because, you know, especially at the beginning of a project, you're all just kind of free form and just, let's just talk about anything. And if it works, it works. And if not, then no one has an ego about it. But I really didn't know where to start with, in my brain, the story that we had worked out in 2019 and in 20 was where my brain was for this new crossover. It was hard for me to kind of break out of that. But Tim just had, I don't know, like 100 ideas, and at least 5 of them were able to utilize all the stuff in the mini comics and then springboard and kind of hopscotch in between it. It's really clever what Tim is doing in his approach to it. So if you're not going to be lost, and you're also not going to just be retreading the same material if you read the mini comics and the Dark Horse crossover.
And that was the really big challenge of this, was that, you know, it's a toy line and it has a story.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not open-ended, right? In a way, like once what they put in the mini comics, like, tells the reason for why they're together and why we have this stuff. And so we had to come up with something to justify a 4-issue series, which is, you know, now sort of mass market and gets to go 20 pages instead of 5 or 6, and, you know, like and gets to be all connected and stuff. So that was the biggest challenge of it. And it's actually where one of the ideas that Freddie and I talked about, you know, sitting around at a hotel bar at PowerCon, that was like, wait, what if we brought that one nugget back and then put that in here, and then it changes why, trying to do it how we do it. It allows you to do, so the things in the mini comics could be part of the story, but they are not the story.
Right.
There you go. I think, yeah. So, and that was the other thing we talked about. Is like, well, if we're gonna have, you know, the toys have so much stuff, and they have so many great ideas, but they're toys. So their justification is, hey, we just got to come up with a great object, and it's got to look awesome, and they can go back to Playmates history and combine, you know, Merman and Aqua Dude and all that sort of stuff, and those will definitely go on my shelf. But like, as a story, we're like, well, we're leaving all this shit on the table. Like, how can we have a He-Man Turtle story and not have Triceratons in it? That would be insane, right? We have to do that. And so IDW and Nickelodeon and everybody was super cool about letting us do this. And initially it was sort of like, well, are we supposed to be able to do this because these aren't part of the toy line? And then they let us do it. So so the way Freddie and I ended up doing it is, yes, the toys are part of the story, but like, we needed to make sure you got to see all the stuff from Ninja Turtles and Masters of the Universe put together, like, because why wouldn't you want to see that? You know, right. Like we had to have a arena, you know, in the Triceraton homeworlds where He-Man fights Triceratons, and they bring out the massive Masters of the Universe monster, and then we had to have this scene where, like, you know, we get to go to Snake Mountain, and like, we had to have the stuff because that would be leaving stuff on the table that we were just not going to do. You know, just like, and as an old school Masters of the Universe fan, but also I was reading the Ninja Turtles comic when it came out black and white, starting with issue, like, I don't know, 6 or 7, somewhere in there. Yeah. And then also I was a huge fan of the Archie Turtles comic too. But there's so much stuff in there that would make a good combination, you know, like, I mean, and Ratatouille is one of them, and some of the villains in there, and some of the He-Man villains. Like, we can't leave this on the table. So props to those guys for letting us use it and letting us cram all that shit in there in 4 issues. So we got
it. Dude, I mean, you should. I know that you're a humble person, Tim, but seriously, you've done an excellent job because everything that you just described is like a summation of why it's difficult to combine and to work out the way, you know, what you did. But it's almost like, you know, in the moment, whenever it was happening, it was truly a revelation to me how you got it to work, because I was just thinking, I don't know how exactly. And then you just immediately had these ideas, like, you know, popping immediately. So, you know, I was impressed by it. I think everyone else will be whenever they read it and stuff, but I was even more impressed that you were coming up with it on the spot and quickly. So here, yeah, good job.
Improv BS. Well, there's also just the thing too, is like, I'm not going to have going to have a Freddie book where I don't use you to draw some of these things, right? Like, you know, because I know you can kill it on some of these big stuff because I've seen you do it. And so I have to, you know, in the first issue, we get this massive, you know, crossover battle that looks like George Perez thing, because I know Freddie can do that. But then later it's like, well, I've got to pick the most Freddie things of these two things to draw, which has got to be, Triceratons, and then there's some stuff in issue 3 where, again, there's so much we can't tell people. But there's old school Turtles stuff in there, like with TCRI and back in Manhattan. Is like, well, there's something sort of left out of the toys, because the idea, of course, is to fuse these characters to get awesome action figures. But what's left out of that is you don't get to see He-Man on Earth fighting Casey Jones, right? Or you don't get to see the Turtles on Eternia, like trying to free, Moss Man after he's been turned into a monster from Skeletor. It's like, well, we got to do that. We have to do that, because these guys didn't have time, and they had to make toys and do other stuff.
Yeah,
so it's like,
there's something else that I obviously can't say right now, but I'm putting a pin in it, that if we do a follow-up interview, we do a follow-up podcast, maybe after the 4 issues have come out or something like that. But there was something else that Tim had such a great idea and suggestion that it ended up looping back around and influencing the next line of the toys. Now, of course, we can't talk about that right now because it's like in a future wave of toys. But it was that was, I don't know. Basically, Mattel was like, "That's a great idea. Let's do that too." So
whatever makes toys, we are here to make more toys, right? Obviously, next to my air conditioner there. So, like, if I have more things to put on the pile, I'm happy. Mattel's happy. The children of the world are happy. But yeah, that's and it's also, we have 2 different missions as far as, like, we've got to. If you've already read the mini comics and you come in, it's be like, well, why do I need to read this? And we have to tell you, because this, right? Like, we have to have a reason, and I think we came up with it.
Awesome.
A mystery villain.
Awesome. You've got me grinning from ear to ear. This is exciting. But no, I love that idea. Let's definitely put a pin in it, and we can circle back around, and after the 4th issue drops and everything, and we'll make it happen. That'll be fun.
Cool.
But yeah, well, I think you guys have answered all the questions I have today. I know, we can't talk about too much because of the spoilers and stuff. And but why don't we close?
I sent you the promo for Warriors of the Forgotten Sewers, so you want to include that in your.
Yes, definitely. I'll throw that up there as a graphic. That's awesome. Thank you.
Toys. I know there's at least the Leonardo with the Power Sword.
And I know they did with the 2012 Nickelodeon cartoon series. There was an episode, and they eventually made toys of it, where they're basically running a D&D campaign. And so all the different turtles cosplaying. So there's like a barbarian Raphael. Donatello's a wizard, and so they kind of lean into that Forgotten Sewers stuff with that. Yeah. It was kind of fun to see that brought back.
Oh, because they brought back Krognard? Because Krognard is the name of the barbarian in the one where Reddit goes back in time. There's Krognard. And then in 2012 they turn it into like a
cartoon.
He's a cartoon,
yeah. It's a cartoon that they watch.
Right.
What a great name, Krognard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
In our series, by the way.
Awesome.
So that's how deep I went. People forget what a nerd. Maybe they don't. People forget what a nerd I am. Is what I was going to say.
I have full faith in you. I've loved, like I've said, I've loved what you've done with Master of the Universe, the stories you've written. I love Master of the Multiverse as probably one of my favorite moments in it. And then I absolutely adored Forge of Destiny and what you did with that. Cause as I've told you before, my favorite thing is the He-Man and Teela, relationship. And so anytime that's brought up and talked about and given, some attention to, I love seeing that, in addition to all the badass He-Man stuff that we all love to see. And yeah. And then Freddie, your art is just spectacular. It's perfect.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm very lucky that I've gotten to draw so many crossover things, but especially because like He-Man and the Turtles, like toy wise, the original toys, they almost had the similar proportions, like even the same sort of stance, like the squat sort of body shapes. And I think they go together very well. So, I played with those toys together. It's easy for me to associate them together. Because sometimes what I was just thinking of was recently at a convention, somebody was asking, is it difficult to cross over, so many different properties or to combine these worlds? And maybe because I was a latchkey kid and spent most of my time watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I would purposely stay in from recess. I'd rather stay in to draw rather than go out and play and get all sweaty and all this other stuff on the playground. So to me, they're not all the exact same world. Like, I don't know. I'm sure that there's some crossovers that I would struggle with. But with He-Man and the Turtles, or Batman and the Turtles, or Injustice and Superman, with He-Man and Superman, all that stuff, it all occupies the same sort of geek centers of my brain. And I'm very lucky and happy that there's been all these crossovers have been so well received. And I hope to keep getting to draw this kind of stuff. And I just want to express that how lucky I know that I am. It's like long hours to get this stuff done. There's just a lot of, most of the time that I'm awake, I'm drawing or something, but I'm super lucky to get to draw it. So thank you for your kind words. And thank you everyone who's out there supporting the work and, buying it and talking about it online and stuff, because, hopefully people continue to like them so we can keep doing them.
For sure.
Yeah. I echo that. Well said, Freddie.
Awesome. Well, before we go, I wanted to ask you guys kind of some fun questions. What do you have favorite characters in both of these worlds, in the Turtles world and in the He-Man world?
Go ahead, Freddie.
So to draw, my favorite turtle is Raphael. Just his I make his skull, his skeleton is kind of his understructure, whatever, is aggressive. So his I put sort of like points on his face shape to make it look like if he headbutted you, that would be quite devastating. Like the top of his head's kind of pointy or something. But my favorite, as far as all of the Ninja Turtle universe, would be Splinter, just because of the super fatherly, ultra patient character who also could kick anyone's butt who messed with the Sons or something. That's very that touches me in I never knew my father sort of way. So that's what I would want a surrogate father to be like. I want a rat who can do ninjutsu and also be super wise. In the He-Man universe, I've always liked the Filmation version of He-Man, where really he tried to use, always tried to use diplomacy, charm, a smile to kind of diffuse the situation. But if it came to it, he could lift up a mountain or sock someone right in the face if he really needed to. I appreciate even that, as not to get too deep into psychology, but even as a model of what masculinity could or should be in my brain, is not somebody who's a loud mouth and everyone's afraid of them. And somebody who, even if they're the strongest person in the room, they're still trying to resolve the situation diplomatically and kind of smooth it out. But if it comes to it, he can lift up a mountain. So I love He-Man. He would definitely be who I would pick from that universe.
I had a conversation with my wife recently. We were talking about, He-Man and why I loved him as a hero. And it was a lot of those same reasons. He has a sword and he has an axe, but as we know, He-Man, once we get out of the mini comic eras, he is that person who would rather find the nonviolent conclusion and answer to things. And we kind of termed it, he has a gentle masculinity about him. And that's something I always am kind of drawn to, as a father myself, as somebody who tries to be gentle but firm with my kids and teaching them how to be men someday, and what's expected of them out in the world, how to treat women, how to treat people in general. I think He-Man is a good role model for that. So
I agree
with you.
All the power in the universe, but it's not about him using it, it's about him sharing it, right?
Yes.
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, so when I started this, I had favorites. But then I'd never written Ninja Turtles before, even though I grew up on Turtles. So I had to kind of like figure out in my head what voices them sounded like, I think. But it's, you assume it's going to be Raphael probably or Michelangelo, but like every time I would write Donatello, I would delight. I noticed. But Splinter for sure, same as Freddie. Love Splinter. He has huge moments in ours. And then I always like writing Tila for sure, but slowly but surely, Man at Arms always works his way. No matter what I write, I'm always like, man, why am I leaning so heavily on Man at Arms? But I always do, and I did it again this time. So
awesome. Well, fantastic. So with this new crossover, are there any standout designs that you just love of what you've created that you can talk about without spoiling?
Oh, that I've created? Actually, we're just using the toy designs in these with subtle variation. Like, I customized some of the Triceratons, but I didn't do anything dramatically different than what was established in Mirage or the IDW continuities for the Triceratons. But all of the Mattel has like several different versions of a lot of the different characters, the primary characters and stuff. So we're able to, and Tim was able to work in. So there's like, there's like the typical what you think of He-Man, the Filmation version with the Iron Cross and the the chest piece and stuff. And of course, he's the main version of He-Man. But they have 2 or 3 different versions of him in the toys, the Turtles of Grayskull line. And so far, I've seen Tim integrate the main one and the two of the side versions of He-Man.
Cool.
So part of what's impressed me is that Tim was able to not just work out the story issues that I was describing earlier of making them coincide and hopscotch around the mini comics, but also find ways in story to use those designs in clever ways that didn't seem ham-fisted, where it's just like, this would be the wrong way to do it, where somebody would just walk out of the room, and when they walk back, they're in the new design, and they just go, look at my new design, and then they continue on to the adventure, and find story ways for them to have a new look because
cool.
The design already exists. It's really cool. So I actually haven't designed much for this.
Okay.
My favorite of the ones they did, and we barely get to use in the comic, which sucks, but fucking Slaker, man.
Yes. Yes.
Look at that thing.
That was going to be mine too.
Oh,
because he's fantastic. I love Slash. Slash is just such a cool Ninja Turtles character. I've got a whole shelf over on the other wall full of him, of different variations of him. And when I saw this design, and then when I got him in hand, and to see how big he is, and heavy,
dude,
he's heavy.
That's a brick of toy. Yeah, it is amazing.
I like the idea that he has. Because like basically the computer that's supposed to be visible is like magnetic tape, like that's like the processor unit or something, but it's also made of pizza. It's mechanical pizza, magnetic tape.
Yeah, pizza there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did an incredible job on that. And the metal bottle design is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Their version of the slime pit, which is like it's got a shredder head on it.
Yeah.
All that stuff is so cool, and we use it. We definitely use it.
Awesome.
But then we had because otherwise it's just one of the hardest things about writing Master Universe stuff, and Freddie and I have talked about that. I think I've talked about is that the tendency is at the end everyone converges on Master Universe and beats the shit out of each other. I mean, and beats the shit out of each other, right? Like that's the go-to. And every time you do a crossover, and Thundercats did it, and we did Injustice Master Universe. They converge on Castle Grayskull and beat the shit out of each other. We're like, we can't do that here. We have to do something different. So it starts out with them converging on Castle Grayskull and beating the shit out of each other, and then goes in a different direction.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful. I can't wait to read the comic. I can't wait to see it and have it in hand. It releases in September. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like
awesome.
September 25th or around there, somewhere in the 20th
like
of something.
Yeah. I'll include it in the show notes.
What was that?
I turned in issue 4 on Friday.
Awesome.
Tim's way ahead. I've still been kind of moonlighting between the mini comics that I'm still drawing because there's a few more waves of the toys that have mini comics. and then also the Dark Horse crossover, and just got back from an international convention and stuff. So Tim is almost exiting. he's so far ahead, but I'm just now getting to like the midpoint because I'm getting far along on issue 2. So I mean, I'll probably be done with issue 3 before the first issue comes out, which is good as far as schedule wise. But my brain is kind of, I was talking beforehand when we're like sort of backstage that my brain is in 2 different spots because the mini comics has different events. Yeah. And they also have different, the way that I'm drawing the turtles is different than in the Dark Horse version. So they are still the same design as far as the crossover toy armor and stuff like that. But just like the head shapes in the mini comics, I'm making them more look like the Playmates Ninja Turtles. And even all the, the style is not, me trying to do like a juvenile style, but it's more trying to match some more of the iconic style points of the toys and stuff. And then in the Dark Horse book, it's more of like the PG-13 sort of version of them. So the head shapes and even their proportions and stuff like that is different. So whenever I'm particularly fatigued, sometimes I realize I'm drawing the wrong versions of their heads or their body shapes or something. And then I'm like, I have to do it again. I have to draw this and fix it because it will look inconsistent if I suddenly draw the Playmates heads with their big eyes, the sort of the doe eyes that are more like the toys, if I draw that in the Dark Horse. So I'm just remarking on how envious I am, how far ahead Tim is on his part of it.
Well, I have to get started on you and me's next thing. So there you go. I guess.
Yes. Good tease.
Amazing.
Yes,
that's a good tease.
You're going to be like 10 months ahead of me, though. But that's cool with me, man.
Probably. Yeah. Work-wise, this is going to be some work on this one. So.
Well, thank you again to the both of you for joining me today and taking some time out of your schedules. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's wonderful to meet you, Freddie, Tim. Always a pleasure. For people who want to find you online and follow your work, where can they find you?
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. I'm at Hackin' Tim Seeley at Twitter and Tim Seeley on Instagram.
I'm Freddie Art on X. I still call it Twitter. So Freddie Art on Twitter, on Instagram, and then Facebook. I'm just Freddie Williams II or whatever. But I post on those pretty regularly each day. So those are the best places. Then FreddieArt.com is my website.
Awesome. And I will include those in the show notes so people can find it easily. So
cool.
And to everybody out there watching, thank you for joining us. You can find me at Dad at Arms. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.